The cabin lights flickered as the plane rolled toward the runway, and everything seemed normal, until the shouting started. A tall white man in a gray suit shot up from his seat, pointing angrily across the aisle. "We are not sitting next to her," he barked loud enough for half the passengers to turn. His wife clutched her handbag tight, her face twisted with disgust as she stared at the quiet black girl beside them, a small 13-year-old with big brown eyes and braids, hugging her backpack like it was the only safe thing she had left in the world. People gasped. A flight attendant rushed over. The girl shrank back into her seat, blinking fast to fight her tears. "We paid good money for these seats," the man snapped. "Move us. Now." The pilot himself stepped out from the cockpit, something that almost never happens, and walked slowly toward the commotion. Every passenger held their breath. His face was calm, too calm, but his eyes were sharp. He stopped a few feet from the couple, looked at the girl, then looked back at them. And then, in a voice cold enough to freeze the air, he said, "Sir, before we take off, I need to make an announcement. You may want to sit down for this." The entire cabin fell silent. The couple stared at him. The girl hugged her backpack tighter, and the pilot reached for the intercom, but just before he spoke, something happened that none of them expected. The story didn't start on the plane. It began hours earlier, before anyone knew that this flight would become the talk of news channels for weeks, before anyone knew that someone's hidden truth would shake an entire cabin of passengers. It started with the girl Madison Carter. Here we tell stories of strength, love, and redemption, where every struggle hides a deeper meaning. Stay inspired and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories. Madison had always been quiet, the type of kid who stayed close to her grandmother, the type who loved drawing more than talking, and the type who noticed when people looked at her differently. That morning, she sat in the back of a taxi with her grandma, clutching the plane ticket that still smelled like fresh paper. She had never been on a plane before. She had never left Georgia. And she definitely had never imagined she would be traveling alone. Her grandma, Nancy Carter, a silver-haired woman with warm brown eyes, patted Madison's hand gently. "You're gonna be okay, baby," Nancy whispered. "Your aunt will be waiting for you when you land. And you call me as soon as you arrive, you hear?" Madison nodded, though fear tugged at her stomach. "Grandma, what if something bad happens?" Nancy smiled the way only a grandmother could, soft, sweet, and hopeful. "Kindness always finds its way back," she said. "And people who mistreat others? Life has a way of teaching them lessons." Madison didn't fully understand what she meant. Not yet. When they arrived at the airport, Nancy helped Madison drag her bag inside. The airport was huge, buzzing with people, rolling suitcases, and loud announcements. Madison felt small, but her grandma never let go of her hand. As they checked in, an older man in a blue shirt accidentally bumped into them and muttered without looking back. "Watch it," Madison whispered. "It's okay, Grandma." Nancy touched her shoulder. "Some people see the world through angry eyes. Don't let them make you see yourself that way too." They walked deeper into the airport, and that was when they met the couple for the first time, Richard and Evelyn Blake. Both were dressed like they were attending a business meeting, not a flight. Evelyn wore a pearl necklace and gloves even though it wasn't cold. Richard walked like the floor belonged to him. Nancy noticed the way they stared at Madison, like she wasn't supposed to walk the same hallway as them. But instead of saying anything, she tightened her grip on Madison's hand and whispered, "Keep walking, sweetheart." They reached the security line, where Nancy knelt in front of Madison one more time. "Remember," she said softly, "you are kind, you are smart, and you belong anywhere your feet can take you. Don't you forget that." Madison nodded, tears building in her eyes. Nancy hugged her tightly, so tightly Madison wished the moment wouldn't end. But it had to. Madison made it through security, turned around and waved at her grandma on the other side. Nancy waved back with both hands, smiling through her own tears. That was the last smile Madison would see from her grandmother before the plane incident. Inside the terminal, Madison found her gate and took a seat. She plugged in her earphones and watched the planes through the huge glass windows. She took deep breaths to calm her nerves. Next to her, the white couple, Richard and Evelyn, sat stiffly, whispering things they thought Madison couldn't hear. Why would they let kids travel alone anyway? Evelyn muttered. "She should have been seated somewhere else," Richard replied. Madison lowered her head. She didn't want trouble. She just wanted to be safe. When boarding time came, she walked onto the plane, handed her ticket to the flight attendant, and found her seat. It was next to the couple. The moment they saw her walking toward them, their faces twisted. And minutes later, just after takeoff procedures began, the explosion of anger started. Back to the present moment on the plane. The white couple stood, refusing to sit, pointing at Madison as if she had done something wrong by simply existing. Passengers were whispering. Children were staring. Even the flight attendants were frozen. Then came the pilot, stepping up with steady footsteps and eyes that missed nothing. He picked up the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I need your attention for a very important message before we depart." His voice echoed through the cabin. Madison's heart thumped so hard she could hear it. Richard crossed his arms. Evelyn huffed loudly. And then, the pilot's next words made every head whip around. He said, "The couple in seat 14A and 14B needs to hear this especially." He paused. The plane went silent. Passengers leaned in. Madison's eyes widened. Richard and Evelyn stiffened. And then, before the pilot could finish his announcement, a loud scream rang out from the back of the plane. A scream that stopped the pilot mid-sentence. A scream that made everyone stand. A scream that changed everything. The scream sliced through the cabin like a knife. Every passenger jumped. The pilot lowered the intercom slowly, turning his head toward the back of the plane. Even the couple who had been shouting at Madison froze, their anger melting into confusion. A second scream followed, this one louder, shaking with fear. A flight attendant rushed past Madison, nearly tripping over someone's foot as she hurried down the aisle. Another attendant followed her, pressing a hand to her headset. "What's happening?" someone whispered. "Is it an emergency?" Madison's heart pounded in her chest. She hugged her backpack tighter. She didn't know what was going on, but she knew it was bad. The pilot looked at the couple, then at Madison, then back at the rear of the plane. "Stay in your seats," he commanded, voice firm. "Everyone stay calm." But calm was the last thing the passengers felt. The man beside Madison, the angry one, sat down hard, worry flickering across his face. His wife grabbed his arm, whispering something that sounded like, "What if it's dangerous?" Behind them, a baby began crying. A woman whispered a prayer. A man unbuckled his seatbelt before a flight attendant rushed over to stop him. Madison felt a chill crawl up her spine. She wanted to ask what was happening, but her mouth felt glued shut. The pilot made his way toward the back. People tried to peek through the gaps between seats as he disappeared behind a curtain. Seconds stretched into minutes, long heavy minutes filled with nervous murmurs and tapping feet. Finally, the curtain rustled. The pilot stepped back into the aisle. His face was serious. Too serious. People leaned in. "What's going on?" someone asked. The pilot raised a hand. "We have a medical situation," he said. "We're handling it. Please remain seated." A medical situation. Madison swallowed hard. Did someone faint? Was it an allergic reaction? Her mind ran in circles. The couple beside her seemed less angry now, their earlier rage replaced by worry. Evelyn clutched her husband's arm tighter than before. "This airline needs to get itself together," Richard muttered, though not nearly as loudly as earlier. Fear softened his tone. But the pilot wasn't finished. He walked past Madison again on his way back to the cockpit, and for just a second he glanced at her. Not angry, not annoyed, almost protective. Madison didn't know what that meant. Before he reached the front, another passenger, a teenage boy in glasses, stood up suddenly. "My mom," he shouted. "Something's wrong with my mom." His voice cracked with panic. A few passengers gasped. The boy pointed toward the back where the scream had come from. "She can't breathe." The boy tried to push past the rows, but a flight attendant caught him gently by the shoulders. "Sir, please." "No. Let me go. She needs me." Madison's chest tightened as she watched the scene unfold. The boy's face was red, tears pooling in his eyes. He struggled against the attendant, desperate to help his mother. Madison felt the fear as if it were her own. People turned toward the back again. The curtain still hid whatever was happening. Whispering spread across the cabin like wildfire. "Is she having a heart attack? Do they have a doctor?" Oh God, I hope she's okay. Madison bit her lip, her fingers digging into the fabric of her backpack. The flight attendant guiding the boy tried to soothe him. Listen, she whispered. The pilot is with her. We have oxygen tanks. We're doing everything we can. The boy clutched the seat in front of him. Please, he begged. She needs me. I know, the attendant said softly. But you can't go back there right now. For a moment the plane felt like a different world, tight, warm and full of fear. The anger from earlier was forgotten. Even the couple who had shouted at Madison sat quietly, watching the scene with wide eyes. Madison took a slow breath and leaned back in her seat. What if the woman in the back didn't make it? She had never seen someone in a real medical emergency before. The thought scared her deeply. As the boy continued to cry silently, Madison reached into her pocket and pulled out a tissue. Her hand shook as she extended it gently toward him. He looked at her surprised. It's okay, Madison whispered, her voice barely louder than a breath. He hesitated just for a second, then took the tissue with trembling fingers. Thank you, he whispered. Madison nodded softly. Richard, the man who had yelled at her minutes earlier, watched the small exchange. His expression flickered, something like shame or confusion, like he couldn't understand how the girl he had treated so badly was so calm and kind. But he said nothing. Minutes passed before the pilot finally returned to the front of the cabin. He didn't look panicked, but he didn't look calm either. His jaw was set tight and he moved quickly. People held their breath. He picked up the intercom again. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, we need to stay on the ground a bit longer. We are calling for medical staff to come aboard before we take off. Relief and fear washed through the cabin in equal waves. The teenage boy wiped his face, shaking. Madison relaxed her grip on her backpack slightly, though her heart still thudded hard. Then the pilot continued. And I want to make something very clear, he said, his voice shifting, growing firmer, colder. The couple in 14A and 14B tensed. Madison looked up at him, breath catching in her throat. We will not tolerate disrespect toward any passenger on this aircraft, the pilot said, especially toward a child. Gasps spread through the cabin. Madison's eyes widened. Richard stiffened. Evelyn looked around nervously. But before the pilot could say more, someone near the back of the plane shouted, She's not breathing again. Hurry! The plane exploded into panic. The pilot dropped the intercom and sprinted toward the rear. Flight attendants rushed after him. Passengers stood despite instructions not to. The boy screamed for his mother. Madison froze in fear. And then, just as the pilot disappeared behind the curtain, a loud thud echoed through the plane. Something or someone had fallen. The thud was so loud that every passenger jumped. It wasn't the kind of sound you could mistake. Something heavy had hit the floor. Gasps rippled down the aisle. The teenage boy shouted for his mother again, his voice cracking with fear. Even the couple who had caused the earlier chaos seemed frozen, their faces pale as they stared toward the back of the plane. Madison's eyes widened. Her heart felt like it was trying to escape her chest. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew it was bad, really bad. Flight attendants hurried through the aisle like a wave of blue uniforms. One of them whispered urgently into her headset, her hands trembling. Passengers twisted in their seats, craning their necks to see behind the curtain. But the curtain stayed shut, hiding whatever was unfolding in the back. Madison wanted to close her eyes, but she couldn't look away. Fear held her still. The teenage boy, still crying, still shaking, tried again to stand, but his knees buckled. A man nearby caught him and helped him sit. Take a breath, son, the man said gently. The boy shook his head hard. I can't. That's my mom back there. His words hit Madison like a cold wind. She felt the pain behind them. She felt how scared he was. And she wished she could help, but she didn't know how. The other passengers whispered anxiously. What if she collapsed? Should we go back there? How long is this going to take? But then something unexpected happened. A woman too rose ahead of Madison. An older lady with a soft face and silver streaks in her hair stood up slowly. She wore a simple blue dress and held a small tote bag. She wasn't tall or loud or the kind of person who demanded attention. Yet somehow when she stepped into the aisle, the whole cabin went quiet. She walked toward the back, calm, steady, almost peaceful. A flight attendant tried to stop her. "Ma'am, please return to your seat." But the woman smiled gently. "Sweetheart, I spent 40 years as a nurse. I think you could use another pair of hands." The attendant hesitated, eyes darting toward the curtain, then nodded and stepped aside. The older woman walked through the curtain and vanished. The plane hummed with tension. Even the teenager stopped crying for a moment, staring at the spot where she disappeared. Madison sat back, still holding her backpack like a shield. She whispered, "Please let her be okay," though she wasn't sure if she meant the boy's mother or the brave older woman who had just walked into the unknown. Minutes crawled by. Then suddenly the curtain shifted again. The older woman stepped out, her face serious but not panicked. She walked straight to the teenage boy. "She's breathing," the woman said softly. The boy nearly collapsed with relief. "She is." "Yes," the woman nodded. "She fainted from low blood pressure and panic. But we stabilized her. The paramedics will take her off the plane as soon as they arrive." The whole cabin let out a breath. Some passengers even clapped quietly. Madison's body finally relaxed, though her heart still felt heavy. She didn't know the woman or the boy or the mother, but seeing people help one another felt warm, safe, kind, something her grandma would have been proud of. Richard and Evelyn looked almost embarrassed by the kindness happening around them, kindness they had refused to show Madison minutes earlier. But the moment of peace didn't last long. The pilot stepped forward from behind the curtain. His sleeves were rolled up, and his face was slick with sweat, but his eyes remained sharp and focused. He headed straight toward the front of the cabin, straight toward the intercom. Passengers held their breath again. Madison felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. The couple beside her shifted uncomfortably. The pilot picked up the microphone slowly, like he was giving the cabin one last chance to settle before he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "medical personnel will be boarding shortly. But before they do, I have something I need to address." He paused. The cabin tensed. Madison swallowed hard. "This flight," the pilot continued, "is going to be delayed because someone needed help. And on this aircraft we do not abandon people when they need us." A woman murmured, "Amen to that." "And we also," he added, voice sharpening, "do not tolerate discrimination or cruelty." Richard stiffened. Evelyn's face went red. Madison felt every eye turn toward their row. The pilot continued, "A young girl on this flight was made to feel unwelcome. And as long as I am the captain of this aircraft, no child or any passenger will be treated like that." Madison felt her throat tighten. She lowered her gaze, cheeks warm. Some passengers nodded. A few even clapped softly again. But the pilot wasn't finished. He turned toward Madison. Cold air rushed through her chest. He didn't smile, but his voice softened a little. "Young lady," he said, "you've done nothing wrong. Thank you for staying calm." Madison blinked fast, the praise catching her off guard. But then the pilot looked at the couple, directly at them. "Hard. Sir. Ma'am. You and I will have a conversation before this flight continues." The couple squirmed like children caught misbehaving in school. Evelyn whispered, "Richard, he can't do that, can he?" Richard didn't answer. No one had time to react further because the next moment, a loud knock echoed from outside the plane. Paramedics. The door opened. Cold air rushed in. Red uniforms stepped aboard. People moved aside. The teenage boy stood, shaking, as they guided him toward his mother at the back. Madison watched quietly, grateful they were here. But as the paramedics disappeared behind the curtain, something else happened. Something that shifted the entire mood again. A voice from outside shouted up the jet bridge, "Captain, we need you out here now." The pilot looked toward the door, confused. "For what?" he called back. "It's the grandmother of the unaccompanied minor," the voice answered. Madison froze. Grandmother? Her chest tightened. Grandma wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere close. The plane grew silent again. Passengers looked around. Richard and Evelyn exchanged confused glances. The pilot stepped toward the door, eyes narrowing. "Who?" he asked firmly. The voice repeated, "The grandmother of the black girl traveling alone." Madison felt her heart jump into her throat. Her hands trembled. Her breath caught. Because her grandmother shouldn't be anywhere near this airport. Her grandmother was supposed to be home. And worse, her grandmother should not be alive. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring and emotional stories like this. Madison's breath caught in her throat. Her grandmother? Here. At the airport? That was impossible. Her grandmother, Nancy Carter, had hugged her goodbye hours ago. She was supposed to be home now, probably sitting in her favorite rocking chair, drinking her warm ginger tea, waiting for Madison's call. Nancy would never rush across town for no reason. And she definitely would not board an airport jet bridge unexpectedly. Madison's fingers tightened around her backpack straps until her knuckles turned white. The pilot stepped toward the open door, confusion tightening his face. You said who? He repeated. The girl's grandmother. The voice shouted again from outside. She needs to speak with you urgently. Passengers exchanged shocked looks. Is the girl in trouble? Someone whispered. Why would her grandmother be here? Madison felt dizzy. The world around her seemed to tilt. The buzzing overhead lights blurred for a moment like she was underwater. Her grandmother couldn't possibly be here. Unless something was wrong. Terribly, terribly wrong. A flight attendant knelt beside Madison's seat. Sweetie, she said softly, did your grandmother tell you she was coming? Madison shook her head slowly. No, she didn't. The attendant's face softened with concern. Stay right here, okay? The captain will check what's going on. Madison nodded, though her heart was pounding so loudly she barely heard anything else. The captain stepped into the jet bridge, and the cabin door began to close behind him, leaving the passengers to murmur nervously. Richard and Evelyn, the couple who had refused to sit beside Madison, looked uneasy again, but this time for a different reason. What kind of family situation is this? Evelyn whispered to her husband. Stay out of it, Richard muttered, but his eyes were glued to Madison, and for the first time they didn't look angry, they looked curious, maybe even nervous. Madison wished she could disappear. She hated being stared at. She hated being the center of attention, especially now when fear was crawling up her throat like a vine. A loud thump came from the jet bridge. Then voices. Raised. Urgent. Madison leaned forward trying to hear, but the words were muffled. A few passengers turned in their seats, trying to catch bits of the conversation. The pilot hadn't returned. Something wasn't right. Grandma, what happened? Why are you here? Madison squeezed her eyes shut. If Grandma really was outside the plane, something serious must have happened. Her grandma was strong, but she wasn't the type to run anywhere unless she absolutely had to. Minutes crawled by like hours. Finally, the pilot stepped back through the plane door. But he did not walk calmly. He rushed inside. His face was pale. Too pale. A flight attendant hurried to him. Captain, what's? Close the door for a moment, he said quietly. The attendant blinked. Sir. I said close it. She obeyed, slowly pulling the heavy door shut until it clicked into place. Passengers twisted around in their seats. A woman whispered, Is this about that emergency earlier? No, this feels like something else. The pilot ran a hand across his forehead. He looked at Madison as if trying to choose his next words carefully. He took 2 steps toward her row. Madison, he said gently, I need to ask you something. Madison's throat felt dry. Why, yes, sir. He knelt slightly, coming to her eye level, lowering his voice. Is your grandmother? Nancy Carter. Madison nodded, fear prickling down her spine. Yes. And she's the one who dropped you off this morning? At the airport. Yes, Madison whispered. Is she okay? The captain swallowed hard. She says she needs to speak to you immediately. Madison's stomach flipped. Speak to me? Why? She asked, voice trembling. The captain opened his mouth to answer, but a sudden loud knock banged on the cabin door. Everyone jumped. The knock came again. Harder this time. Open the door, a woman's voice shouted urgently from the other side. Madison's heart skipped. She knew that voice. She would know it anywhere. Grandma, she whispered. The pilot exchanged a worried glance with a flight attendant. Let her in, he said. The attendant pulled the door open, and there she was. Nancy Carter. But she didn't look like herself. Her eyes were wide, filled with panic. Her usually neat gray hair was messy, and her breathing was heavy, as if she had run the entire length of the airport without stopping. She stepped inside the aircraft, scanning the passengers. Then her eyes landed on Madison. "Baby," she cried, rushing forward. "We need to go. Now." Madison felt her entire world tilt. "Grandma? What's wrong? Why are you here?" Nancy reached her and pulled her into a tight hug, tighter than the one earlier that morning. Madison could feel her shaking. The passengers stared. The couple stared. Even the flight attendants hovered nervously, unsure what was happening. Madison pulled back enough to see her grandmother's face. "Grandma, tell me, what happened?" Nancy cupped her cheeks with trembling hands. "Sweetheart, you can't get on this plane." Madison froze. "Why not?" Nancy swallowed hard and looked around, as if choosing her words. Then she leaned closer to Madison and whispered, "There was a call. About you." "What kind of call?" the captain asked, stepping closer. Nancy's voice shook as she spoke. "A call saying Madison was in danger." Silence. Every passenger froze. Madison's eyes widened. "Danger? What do you mean?" I don't understand." Nancy shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "Someone called the house after you left. They said something terrible. They said a threat was made. I don't know who. I don't know why. But they said it had to do with this flight." Gasps echoed through the cabin. The captain stiffened, his training kicking in immediately. "Who made the call?" he demanded. "I don't know," Nancy said. "But the moment I heard, I ran. I had to reach her." Passengers murmured, panic rising again. "Is this a threat? Is someone targeting the flight? Should we leave the plane?" Madison felt faint. A threat? Against her? Why? She wasn't important. She wasn't rich. She wasn't famous. She was just a scared 13-year-old girl trying to visit her aunt. The captain took control quickly. "Everyone remain seated. No one leaves until we confirm details." Nancy looked at him with desperate eyes. "Captain, please, she cannot stay on this plane." Madison grabbed her grandmother's hand. "Grandma, why would someone want to hurt me?" Nancy hesitated. Her lips trembled. Her eyes filled again. And then she whispered something that made Madison's entire world spin. "Baby, it's about your mother." Madison's breath hitched. "Mom? But she's gone." Nancy shook her head slowly. "Madison," she whispered, "there are things you don't know." The passengers leaned in. The captain froze. And Madison felt the floor tilt beneath her. Nancy took a trembling breath and opened her mouth to reveal the truth. But before she could speak, a sudden explosion of shouts erupted from the front of the plane. The flight attendants screamed. The captain spun toward the cockpit. And then, someone burst into the cabin. Someone who was not supposed to be there. The person who burst into the cabin didn't come through the main door. They came straight out of the cockpit. The entire plane gasped. A man in dark clothing, black hoodie, black cap, black gloves, stumbled into the aisle, breathing hard as if he had been hiding in a cramped place for too long. His face was half covered by the hoodie, but Madison could see the sharpness in his eyes. Cold, focused, dangerous. A flight attendant screamed and backed away so quickly she hit the beverage cart behind her. Another passenger ducked, pulling her child close. The captain rushed forward. "Hey, stop right there." But the man ignored him. He scanned the cabin like he was searching for something, or someone. Nancy stepped in front of Madison instantly, shielding her with her body. "Stay behind me," she whispered, her voice shaking. The man's gaze swept across the passengers, row by row, seat by seat, until his eyes locked onto Madison's row. A chill ran through her entire body. Richard and Evelyn, the couple who had refused to sit next to her, froze, their expressions shifting from confusion to terror. The man took a slow step forward. "You," he said, pointing at Madison. The plane erupted. "What does he want? Who is he? Is he armed? Call security." Passengers screamed. Someone pressed the flight attendant call button repeatedly, even though it was useless now. A baby cried loudly from the middle rows. A man reached for his phone, but another shouted at him, "Don't record. You'll make it worse. The captain held out his arms, standing between the stranger and the passengers. You need to back away. Now. But the man didn't move back. He moved forward. Step by step. Madison clutched her grandmother's sleeve. Grandma, who is he? What does he want? Nancy shook her head. I don't know, baby. Stay behind me. Don't move. But the look in Nancy's eyes told Madison she did know something. Or at least she feared something. The stranger pointed again at Madison. She needs to come with me. Now. Nancy's voice cracked. Over my dead body. The man's jaw twitched. I don't want to hurt anyone, he said, though the coldness in his voice made the words feel empty. But she has to come with me. Another flight attendant approached cautiously. Sir, please, put your hands where we can see them. The stranger turned toward him sharply. And for a moment, just a moment, everyone thought something terrible was about to happen. But instead, he lifted his empty hands and said, I'm not here to attack anyone. I just need the girl. A wave of terrified whispers rolled through the cabin. The girl? Why her? What does he want with the child? Richard suddenly stood up, driven by fear more than bravery. You're not taking anyone from this row. His wife grabbed at his sleeve. Richard, sit down. Sit down. But it was too late. The man snapped his head toward him with a glare so sharp Richard instantly dropped back into his seat. The captain took another step closer to the intruder. Who are you? How did you get on this plane? The man's eyes narrowed. I've been here the whole time. Gasps erupted. Someone shouted. He was hiding? Another cried out. Check the ceiling compartments. The captain stiffened. Did you access the cockpit? That's a federal offense. No, the stranger cut sharply. I was hidden. Someone let me in. Someone with clearance. That stunned everyone. Someone with clearance? The captain's face tightened. Who? The man turned his head slightly, eyes flicking toward the rear of the plane. But before he could speak, someone else appeared behind him. A uniformed security officer. Freeze! The officer yelled, raising a hand. Don't move. More screaming. Passengers ducked in their seats. A drink cup spilled. Someone fainted. The teenager whose mother had fainted earlier jumped in shock, grabbing the armrest hard. The stranger slowly raised his hands again, but this time, his expression was different. He looked frustrated. Do not fire, the pilot commanded. There are passengers everywhere. I said don't move, the officer repeated, stepping forward cautiously. The pilot raised a hand to calm him. Let's handle this carefully. There are children here. But the officer's eyes were locked on the stranger. Step away from the passengers, he ordered. The man spoke quietly. I'm not here to fight. I just need to talk to the girl. Nancy stepped forward, trembling but firm. You stay away from her. The stranger looked straight at Nancy, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition. You're her grandmother, he said. Nancy stiffened. And you have no business near my grandbaby. The stranger hesitated, and for the first time Madison noticed something in his eyes. Sadness. Regret. A flash of something human. Then he said quietly, Madison, I need to tell you something about your mother. Madison felt her world snap open. Her mother? The one she believed was dead? The stranger took another step, ignoring the officer's warning. Your mother is alive. The cabin exploded into gasps. Madison's ears rang. Her heart thudded so loudly she could barely breathe. No, Madison whispered. That's not possible. Grandma said. Nancy put an arm around her urgently. Baby, don't listen to him. The stranger shook his head. She didn't die. She was taken. And she sent me here to protect you. Security lunged forward. The stranger jumped back, raising his hands. Stop, he shouted. If you arrest me now, you'll put the girl in more danger. You don't understand. The officer grabbed his arm. A struggle broke out. Passengers screamed again. The plane shook as bodies collided with seats. A tray table snapped off. Someone knocked over the beverage cart, sending cans rolling across the aisle. The stranger yelled, Listen to me. Her mother is alive. But the officer forced him down, pressing him hard against the floor. Another officer stormed in from the jet bridge to help. The stranger's voice echoed through the chaos. She's not safe. They're coming for her next. The officer covered his mouth, silencing him. And then, a sudden piercing alarm went off in the cabin. Loud, shrill, impossible to ignore. The pilot spun toward the cockpit, eyes wide. No, he whispered. Not now. Madison clutched her grandmother's hand. Grandma, what's happening? Nancy pulled her close, voice trembling. Baby. That's the security breach alarm. Madison's heart dropped. Does that mean? Nancy pulled her even closer. Yes, she whispered. It means someone else is on this plane. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring and emotional stories like this. The cabin lights dimmed a little as the plane settled into cruising altitude, and the soft hum of the engines filled the air. Maya tried to relax, but her heart was still beating fast after everything that had happened with the white couple, Mr. and Mrs. Grant. Sitting next to her, Miss Eleanor gave her a gentle smile. The kind of smile that told Maya she wasn't alone, even when the world felt cold. But Maya couldn't shake the moment when Mrs. Grant had stood up, looked straight at her, and said in that sharp whisper, "We can't sit next to her." As if Maya wasn't a person. As if she couldn't hear. As if she didn't belong there at all. For a while Maya watched the clouds pass below like soft mountains made of cotton. She wondered why people acted the way they did. Why some grown-ups who should know better treated others badly just because of their skin color. She didn't understand it, and she didn't think she ever would. Miss Eleanor touched Maya's hand lightly. "You're doing great, sweetheart," she said. "Don't let anyone make you feel small." Maya nodded, trying to push away the sting of earlier. "I wasn't doing anything wrong," she whispered. "Exactly," Miss Eleanor replied. "Some people have small minds, but yours is bright. Remember that." The comforting words settled over Maya like a warm blanket. For a few minutes she felt a little lighter. She even managed a tiny smile when a flight attendant came by offering pretzels and juice. Miss Eleanor took apple juice. Maya chose orange. But the peace didn't last long. A sudden jolt shook the plane. Just a quick shake, nothing too serious, but enough for a few passengers to gasp. A few overhead bins rattled. Maya grabbed the armrests. "Is that bad?" she whispered, eyes wide. "Just a small bump," Miss Eleanor reassured her. "Normal for flying." It was a small event, not too scary, but Maya still felt her stomach flip. The captain's calm voice came over the speaker, saying it was just a patch of light turbulence. Nothing to worry about. But while Maya calmed down, something else was brewing a few rows ahead. Mrs. Grant kept looking back at Maya with tight lips, whispering something to her husband. Mr. Grant looked angry, not loud angry, but the quiet kind, the kind that made the air feel heavy. When Maya caught them staring again, she quickly looked away. Miss Eleanor noticed. "Don't mind them," she said. "Some people stare at things they don't understand." But Maya did mind. She worried that maybe she had done something wrong without realizing it. As she thought about that, something gentle happened. A little girl across the aisle, maybe 8 or 9, smiled at Maya and waved. She had freckles and red hair tied in pigtails. She held a coloring book and lifted it a little like a silent invitation. Maya's heart warmed. She waved back shyly. The girl's mother leaned toward Maya. "Feel free to borrow some colors if you'd like," she said with a warm smile. "Thank you," Maya said softly. Moments like this felt like sunshine after clouds, simple, kind, easy. They reminded Maya that not everybody was like the Grants. Some people just saw another person, not another color. But the sky outside had started to change. A patch of dark clouds drifted into view. The plane tilted just a little, then straightened. The captain's voice came on again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're passing through a bit of unstable air. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Maya took a deep breath. She stayed close to Miss Eleanor. The older woman hummed softly, maybe to calm Maya, maybe to calm herself. Maya wasn't sure. A few minutes passed quietly until a loud thud echoed from the back of the plane. Everyone jumped. Even Miss Eleanor flinched. "What was that?" Maya asked, panic rising in her voice. A flight attendant hurried toward the noise. It wasn't screaming, but it wasn't small either. Passengers turned in their seats, curious and worried at the same time. Before anyone could settle again, Another bump shook the aircraft, harder this time. A drink cup slid off a tray table and hit the floor. A toddler started crying. This wasn't just a little turbulence anymore. Maya gripped Miss Eleanor's arm tightly. "Are we safe?" "We're okay," Miss Eleanor said, though her voice had lost a bit of its calm. The plane shook again, sharp and sudden. Then the captain's voice returned, more serious this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, please stay seated. We're going to handle this safely, but we need your cooperation." The cabin fell completely silent. Even the Grants weren't whispering now. Every heartbeat felt loud. Maya swallowed hard. Her small fingers dug into the armrest. Her mind rushed with fear. She didn't want to cry. Not in front of all these people. Miss Eleanor wrapped an arm around her. "You're okay, Maya. I'm right here." But then it happened. The plane dropped. Not a lot. Not enough to cause injuries. But enough that passengers screamed. Maya felt her stomach fly into her throat. She grabbed Miss Eleanor, holding on tightly. The lights flickered. The cabin buzzed with fear. And then, beep, beep, beep. An alarm sounded from the cockpit. Passengers gasped. A flight attendant stumbled but caught herself. Maya froze, her chest tight. The captain came over the speaker one more time, his voice tense. "Everyone remain calm. We're working through a mechanical." The speaker cut off. Just silence. Terrible thick silence. And as the plane shook again, harder this time, Maya thought she heard someone shout, "There's smoke in the front." Passengers screamed. Miss Eleanor pulled Maya close. And right as the chaos grew louder, screams filled the cabin as people twisted around in their seats, trying to see where the shout had come from. The word smoke spread through the air like a spark in dry grass. Maya grabbed the armrest so tight her fingers hurt. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew it was bad, really bad. A thin trail of gray smoke curled from the front galley near the cockpit door. It wasn't thick, but it was enough to make people panic. A flight attendant rushed forward, her voice shaking as she spoke into her walkie-talkie. Another attendant hurried down the aisle, telling people to stay calm, but her hands were trembling. The plane shuddered again, bouncing like it hit an invisible bump in the sky. A baby cried. Someone was praying out loud. Someone else shouted that they wanted to get off the plane, but there was nowhere to go. Miss Eleanor held Maya close. "Deep breaths," she whispered, though her own voice trembled. "We're okay. The crew is trained for emergencies." Maya tried to breathe, but every breath felt like it got stuck halfway in her chest. She thought about her mom back home in Atlanta, who told her that flying was safer than driving. She told herself that over and over. But with the alarms, the shaking, and the smoke, it didn't feel true at all. Up ahead, Mrs. Grant stood halfway out of her seat, clutching her husband's arm. "Thomas, do something. We need to switch seats. We're too close to the smoke." Her voice was shrill, frantic. Mr. Grant snapped. "Sit down, Karen. You think running around will help." But Mrs. Grant only shook harder. "I knew we shouldn't have been placed near them." She cast a shaking glance back toward Maya, as if the child had caused all the chaos in the sky. Even in terror, Maya felt a sting of hurt. Miss Eleanor's eyes narrowed in a way Maya hadn't seen before. But she didn't respond, not yet. Her attention was on the front where a flight attendant was now kneeling, checking some device inside the galley wall. "Is something burning?" Maya whispered. "I don't think so," Miss Eleanor said softly. "Sometimes wires overheat or a machine malfunctions, but the crew knows what they're doing." Another jolt jolted through the plane, sharper, harder. A few people cried out. Someone's drink splashed onto the floor. Maya felt her stomach twist. Then suddenly everything went still. Completely still. The engines hummed the same, the lights stayed on, but the shaking stopped. The alarms quieted. The cabin felt frozen in place. Passengers didn't know whether to relax or get ready to scream again. The captain's voice finally returned over the speakers, this time more steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the scare. We have a minor electrical issue in the front galley. The situation is under control, and there is no danger. Please remain seated as we monitor the system." The entire plane let out a collective breath. Not fully calm, but lighter than before. Maya felt her shoulders drop a little. "So we're okay?" "For now, yes," Miss Eleanor said, brushing a stray curl from Maya's forehead. "That was frightening, but we handled it." Passengers settled back into their seats, but the air still felt tight with leftover fear. A few people whispered prayers of thanks. Others wiped tears. The little girl with red pigtails across the aisle gave Maya a small, encouraging smile again, as if saying, "See? We made it." The plane leveled out. Everything seemed calmer now, a low moment after the big scare. Maya's breathing evened. She took tiny sips of her orange juice, even though her hands were still shaky. But while the cabin steadied, the Grants did not. Mrs. Grant kept twisting in her seat, wiping her forehead, looking back and forth like she expected danger to pop up again at any second. "This never should have happened," she muttered. "Unbelievable. We should have been moved the moment we asked. Thomas, say something to the flight attendant." Mr. Grant sighed heavily. "What do you want me to say?" "That we paid for comfort. That we don't feel safe here. That I refuse to sit next to." Her eyes flicked toward Maya again. This time Miss Eleanor reacted. She leaned forward, her voice low but unshakably firm. "Ma'am, I understand you're frightened. We all are. But please don't take your fear out on a child." Mrs. Grant stiffened in her seat, her face turning a blotchy pink. "I'm not talking to you," she snapped. "Maybe you should," Miss Eleanor replied calmly, "because the person you're blaming for nothing is sitting right beside me, and she can hear every word." Maya's heart thudded as the two women stared at each other. The Grants were clearly not used to anyone talking back to them. Mrs. Grant opened her mouth as if she wanted to argue but seemed to run out of words. She whipped her head away, muttering angrily under her breath. Maya sank back into her seat, half grateful, half nervous. She didn't like arguments, but she also didn't like feeling like she had done something wrong when she hadn't. A few minutes later, the tension slowly eased as the crew moved through the aisle, checking on passengers. The smoke had already cleared. The alarm stayed off. The plane continued smoothly. Maya finally felt her muscles relax. For a moment, she thought the worst was over. But then, the captain's voice returned once more, colder than before. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have detected a new issue and need to take immediate action. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for..." The message cut abruptly. Again, the lights flickered, then dimmed. Passengers gasped. The hum of the cabin dropped, like the plane was powering down. Maya's heart jumped into her throat. "What's happening now?" she whispered. Before Miss Eleanor could answer, the engines made a strange deep churning noise, then sputtered, and the plane tilted. Not a gentle tilt, a sharp sudden one, the kind that sent loose items sliding and people screaming. The girl across the aisle grabbed her coloring book to her chest. Her mother pulled her close. Miss Eleanor gripped the seat in front of her. Maya felt weightless for half a second. The plane was descending. Fast. A flight attendant shouted over the noise. "Heads down. Stay in your seats. Heads down." Maya's breath caught. Fear swallowed her whole. Passengers cried, yelled, prayed, chaos everywhere. The plane shook violently, dropping again. And through the panic, a new extreme event erupted. The masked man stood up so fast his seatbelt snapped against the chair. His voice broke through the chaos like a lightning strike. "Everybody stay still." Passengers screamed. The plane kept shaking as it descended, but now there was a new kind of fear. A human fear, sharper and colder than the storm outside. Maya froze. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. She tightened her grip on Miss Eleanor's arm, afraid to even blink. The masked man wore a dark hoodie and a black cloth over his face. His hands were empty, but the anger in his voice made it feel like he didn't need a weapon to scare people. "Sit down," a flight attendant shouted from a few rows ahead. "Sir, please." He cut her off. "Don't come near me." His voice cracked like he was just as scared as everyone else. The plane lurched again, and several people screamed. Luggage thudded around in overhead bins. The masked man stumbled, grabbing the back of a seat to keep from falling. Maya's breathing went fast, too fast. She wanted to disappear. Her small hands trembled uncontrollably. Across the aisle, the girl with pigtails started crying. Her mother whispered, "It's okay, just breathe, sweetheart. Don't look at him." But even she couldn't hide the terror in her voice. The masked man pointed toward the front of the plane. "They're not telling us the truth," he shouted, voice shaky. "The plane is going down, they won't admit it." We're all in danger. Someone yelled from behind him. Sit down, man. You're making it worse. But the masked man shook his head wildly. I'm not dying without answers. Someone needs to say something. Someone needs to. The plane dipped sharply. Everyone screamed. The masked man fell into the aisle, landing on his hands. People panicked even more, thinking he might attack someone. But when he lifted his head, Maya saw something she didn't expect. He was crying. Not loud, but she saw tears slip down his cheeks underneath the cloth mask. Miss Eleanor leaned close to Maya's ear. Honey, don't look at him. He's afraid. Very afraid. Maya whispered. Is he going to hurt us? No, she said softly but firmly. He's just scared in a different way. A flight attendant slowly moved toward him, hands raised. Sir, we're trying to get control of the aircraft. Please sit down so the pilots can focus. You're scaring the children. The man wiped his eyes, his breathing rough and shaky. The plane shook harder, making him grip the seat. I don't want to die, he whispered, voice cracked. We don't either, the flight attendant replied gently. Please, sit down. For a moment it seemed like he might calm down. Passengers held their breath. The plane steadied just enough to stop the rattling. The masked man slowly stood and backed into his row. With shaking hands he sat down. Everyone breathed just a little easier. But the plane still wasn't steady. The lights flickered again. The engines made another strange grinding noise. Then the captain's voice returned, tight and urgent. Flight attendants, take your seats immediately. That meant something serious. Very serious. Maya felt cold all over. The flight attendants strapped into their emergency seats, their faces pale. The plane started descending faster, too fast. A man shouted, We're dropping. Another screamed, Do something. The captain's voice came over the speaker again, this time yelling over static. Everyone brace. Heads down. Brace. Chaos exploded. People pressed their heads to their knees. Seatbelts snapped tight. Bags slid out of overhead compartments, falling onto seats and aisles. The pigtail girl sobbed into her mother's chest. Maya tried to get into the brace position, but her hands were shaking too hard. I can't, she cried. I can't do it. Yes, you can, Miss Eleanor whispered, guiding her gently. Head down, sweetheart. Just like this. I'm right here. The older woman placed her arm protectively across Maya's back as the plane rattled violently. The Grants were a mess of panic. Mrs. Grant cried uncontrollably, clutching her husband's arm so tight he winced. Mr. Grant looked like he wanted to speak, but fear froze his words. This can't be happening. Mrs. Grant screamed. A loud alarm blared. A horrible, screeching metal sound echoed through the plane. The descent became rougher, like they were falling through pockets of empty air. Passengers shrieked. Maya squeezed her eyes shut. She prayed, something she hadn't done in a long time. Please, please, please. The plane suddenly jerked upward for a second, then dropped again. The pressure felt like it was crushing them. And then, the cockpit door swung open for a split second, slammed back shut from the force, but not before everyone saw something that made their blood run cold. One of the pilots was slumped forward, motionless. Gasps erupted. A man shouted, Did you see that? Another yelled, One of the pilots is down. Maya's heart froze. Miss Eleanor's grip tightened on her back. Someone screamed, We're flying with only one pilot? The flight attendants tried to shout over the noise. Everything is under control. Stay in brace position. But nobody believed that now. The masked man was crying again loudly. Mrs. Grant clutched her husband like the world was ending. The lights flickered even more violently. Then, through the whirring alarms and the crashing turbulence, the intercom crackled again and a voice, not the captain's, started speaking. And as the strange voice trembled through the speaker, the entire cabin fell dead silent, waiting in terror to hear who it was and what they were going to say. The intercom crackled like someone was struggling to find the right button. The entire cabin held its breath. Even the plane seemed to go quiet for a second. No shaking, no rattling, just a thick, heavy silence. Then a trembling voice spoke. Hello, this is First Officer Daniels. Passengers gasped. Someone whispered, That's the co-pilot. The co-pilot sounded terrified, like he was forcing every word out. I need everyone to remain calm. Captain Harris he's incapacitated. He collapsed a few minutes ago, and I've been trying to stabilize the aircraft. The Grants froze. The masked man covered his mouth. The little girl across the aisle whimpered. Maya felt her heart thump so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. Miss Eleanor whispered, "Oh dear." The co-pilot continued, voice shaking. "We've lost one of the engine systems due to an electrical failure. I'm trying to reroute the power, but it's not responding. I'm going to do everything I can to get us down safely. Please brace." The intercom clicked off. The cabin erupted again. People screamed. Some prayed loudly. Others clutched loved ones, trembling. A man shouted that he wanted to say goodbye to his family. A woman cried into her hands. But Maya didn't scream this time. She was too scared to make a sound. Miss Eleanor gently pushed her head back down toward her knees. "It's okay, Maya, whatever happens, we're together," she said softly, her voice breaking for the first time. The plane lurched. A rough, violent jolt that sent the oxygen mask swinging again. The lights brightened, dimmed, then flickered nervously like they weren't sure how long they'd stay on. The co-pilot spoke again, his voice a little steadier this time but still strained. "I've managed to level us a little. We are descending but slower now. I'm going to attempt an emergency landing at the nearest runway." A few people cheered weakly, full of desperate hope. Then he added something that made that hope drop like a stone. "However, the landing gear, it isn't responding." Cries filled the cabin. Someone shouted, "Does that mean we're landing without wheels?" Miss Eleanor held Maya tighter. "Shoo, sweetheart. Don't panic yet." But Maya's tiny voice shook. "Are we going to crash?" "No," Miss Eleanor said with shaky certainty. "We're going to have a rough landing, but we will survive this. Promise you. I won't let anything happen to you." The plane trembled violently again. The masked man sobbed, "I don't want to die." For a moment nobody could move. Nobody could think. The world felt like it was narrowing, shrinking, tightening around every sound and every breath. Then something unexpected happened. A man, tall, African American, maybe in his 40s, unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. Against all rules, all panic, all fear. "Sit down," someone shouted. "What are you doing?" The man raised his hands. "I'm a former Air Force mechanic. I think I might be able to help the crew up front." A flight attendant looked torn. "Sir, you can't go into the cockpit. There are strict rules." "Ma'am, if the landing gear won't deploy, and the captain is unconscious, they need help," he said firmly. "Let me at least try." Passengers murmured with desperate hope. The plane dipped again. Screams filled the air. Finally, the flight attendant nodded sharply. "Follow me." They moved quickly up the aisle, bracing against the shaking. The cockpit door opened, and again passengers caught a glimpse of the captain slumped over, breathing but unmoving. The mechanic disappeared inside the cockpit. The door shut with a metallic click. For a moment the cabin went silent again. Maya looked at Miss Eleanor. "Do you think he can fix it?" "I think he's going to try his best," she whispered. Slowly, the masked man pulled off his cloth face covering, revealing a terrified teenage boy, maybe 17, shaking like he'd never been so afraid in his life. People stared. He whispered, "I didn't want to scare anyone. I just panicked." Instead of yelling at him, the mother of the pigtail girl reached out and touched his hand. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said gently. "Everyone panics in situations like this." The boy nodded, sobbing. For the first time, fear didn't divide the cabin. Connected it. Passengers reached for each other's hands, comforted strangers, prayed together, shared tears. Even Mrs. Grant looked humbled and frightened, not angry. Her voice shook as she whispered something to her husband, holding his hand like she'd never held it before. Minutes passed painfully. The plane shook less, but the tension thickened as they braced for whatever came next. Suddenly, the intercom clicked again. The mechanic's voice filled the cabin. "Landing gear is jammed, but we might be able to force it partially open. It won't be perfect, but it could make the landing safer. We're trying now." Hope rippled through the cabin like a warm breeze. Passengers squeezed hands tighter. Miss Eleanor smiled shakily at Maya. "See? People helping people. That's how we get through." Maya nodded. For the first time she believed it. A loud grinding noise filled the bottom of the plane. Metal twisting, straining, resisting. Then, clank, clank. Two loud bangs shook the aircraft. People gasped. What was that? Someone cried. The mechanic spoke again, breathless. 2 wheels are down. Not all 3, but 2. The cabin filled with relieved sobs, shaky cheers. Maya felt tears in her eyes. Not fear this time, but something warm and thankful. The co-pilot came back on, his voice steadier. Everyone brace for landing. We are touching down in less than 2 minutes. Time slowed. People bent down. Held hands. Closed eyes. The ground rushed up to meet them. The plane dropped lower. 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 Wind roared against the windows. Maya squeezed Miss Eleanor's hand with every ounce of strength she had. Then, the plane hit the runway. Hard. Everything exploded into motion. The impact jolted them forward. Screams. Sparks flew past the windows. The plane slid sideways, grinding across the asphalt. A wing dipped too low and scraped, sending a violent shudder through the cabin. Luggage flew. Oxygen masks swung like wild pendulums. The plane spun, metal screeching against concrete. Hold on! Someone yelled. Maya cried out as the world tilted violently. Miss Eleanor wrapped both arms around her, shielding her. The spinning slowed, 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 and finally, the plane came to a stop. Silence. Deep, heavy silence. No screaming. No shaking. Just breathing. Shaky. Broken. But breathing. Then the intercom crackled weakly. And a new voice, strong, familiar, and unbelievably steady, spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Harris. I'm awake. Help is on the way. Passengers erupted into sobs. Cheers. Prayers. Laughter. And in the middle of it all, Maya looked up at Miss Eleanor with trembling eyes. We made it. Yes, Miss Eleanor whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. We made it, sweetheart. But as the emergency doors opened and passengers prepared to evacuate, Maya noticed the Grant standing frozen, staring straight at her. Both of them, ashamed, changed. And as she held Miss Eleanor's hand and walked toward the sunlight outside, she realized this moment would stay with them forever. If you enjoy this story, subscribe to the channel for more emotional and inspiring stories.